Hello, everyone. My name is Max Fischelson, and today I'll be talking to you about my work titled Multi-Item Non-Truthful Auctions Achieve Good Revenue. This is joint work with Kostas, Brendan, Vasilis, and Santoshini. Now, when most people think of auctions, they'll imagine a rowdy auction house with the paddles, selling some sort of artwork. But what a lot of people don't realize is that auctions are actually extremely prevalent in e-commerce, namely through the ad exchange. So every single time you Google something, such as in this example, iPad Pro, essentially Google will have these slots where ads will go, and they will fill these slots via an instantaneous auction. You will have these automated bidders enter the auction. They will all instantaneously and simultaneously submit some bids, and based on what these bids are, we will allocate different bidders to different ad slots. And this is a gigantic industry, $140 billion in 2015. And so it's really important to understand what's the most efficient way of doing this. How do we allocate bidders to which slots? How much do we charge each of the bidders? These are all really important questions to ask. And so really the question we're trying to ask is, what type of auction do we want to run? There are, in fact, many different types of auctions. So let's first focus our scope onto a specific subset of auctions that are first single item auctions. That means that there is a single item that is being sold, such as this necklace in this little picture here, or maybe a single ad slot. And we're also going to be considering sealed bid auctions. A sealed bid auction entails that all of the bidders will simultaneously submit a bid. Maybe that's through sealed envelopes, maybe that's electronically, I don't know. But it's not going to be an incremental raising of a price. And essentially, with this constraint, there's still many different ways we could sell these items. So the first price auction is the most classic auction and is the most common in practice. Essentially, what this will entail is we will allocate the item to the highest bidder, and that bidder will pay their bid. Crazy stuff. But there's also something called the second price auction, where similarly, the highest bidder will win the auction, but they will actually only pay the second highest bid. So in this case, they would only pay $50. Now, if you're new to auction theory, this might seem like a kind of confusing thing. Like, why would we ever do this? And hopefully this little next example will help illustrate why the benefits of the second price auction. So let's consider a first price auction. And let's say I'm a bidder who comes along and I have an internal value for this necklace of $100. So what bid will I submit into this auction? Well, I'll submit a bid something like 75. I want to bid below my valuation for the item because my goal is to win the item and make a profit. I gained this $100 necklace, but I only paid $75. So I'm incentivized to peel off of my actual value with my bid to try to gain some sort of profit. But there can be problems here. Essentially, if there's another bidder who comes along, say he bids $90. Well, or sorry, rather, he has a valuation of $90. But let's say he bids a little bit more conservatively than I bid. So say he bids $80. He's only willing to go for a $10 profit. He's trying to risk less. Well, based on the way the mechanism works, we'll actually allocate to this $80 bidder. And the guy who wanted the item the most doesn't actually win the item. There's a loss of welfare here. But in the second price auction, we see that bidders are incentivized to bid exactly their value. Why is this? Well, if I'm the $100 bidder, I have no incentive to try to peel off of my value because no matter what, I'm going to be paying the next highest bid, which is $90. All I do is risk a chance of losing the item when I wouldn't have to pay any more. And you can prove pretty easily that for each bidder, it's their optimum strategy to just bid their exact value for the item. So what that means is we call the second price auction truthful. You will be bidding your exact value. And more so than this, because we always allocate to the highest bidder, and the highest bidder has the highest value, that means that this auction optimizes social welfare. Whoever wants the item the most always gets the item. Okay, so we're an ad exchange. We're choosing between the second price auction, which optimizes social welfare, has all of these beautiful economic guarantees, and the first price auction. Well, if you're the Google ad exchange, you say, let's use the first price auction. And so does absolutely every single other major advertiser, or rather ad exchange in the market. Why is this? Well, there are some benefits of the first price auction. Namely, it is simple. The simple winner pays bid mechanic of it is very easy for small businesses to understand, and it's very easy to control exactly how much you're bidding. And also it's transparent. And by that, I mean that the first price auction is what we call credible. What is the definition of credibility? Okay, let's go to a second price auction. And let's say we have two bidders who value the item at $100 and $50. We submit our bids, and the auctioneer goes to the $100 bidder and he says, congratulations, you won the item. The next highest bid was $99. Pay me $99. And as the bidder, there's little I can really do to question this claim. You know, this occurred in a sealed bid fashion. I don't really have access to all of the bids. I have no way of proving that he artificially injected this bid at $99. I kind of really have no choice but to pay what he suggests. Whereas in the first price auction, if we submit bids, say $75, and this guy tells me to pay $99, I'll say no. There's no way you're going to trick me into paying you more than I owe you at a first price auction. There's no room for the auctioneer to deceive the bidders in a profitable way. This is what we call credible. Okay, look, the simplicity and the transparency of the first price auction are great, but in order to actually use the first price auction in practice, we want some sort of guarantee about its revenue. You know, like we want to prove that the first price auction is somehow comparable amount of revenue for the auctioneer to the optimal possible mechanism. You know, we don't want it to be the case such that, oh, if I were to, instead of using the first price auction, deviate to this other auction, I would actually get 1,000,000 times the profit. You know, we want some sort of bound as to how bad the first price auction can be. Now, in order to obtain a result of this form, we actually need to modify the first price auction ever so slightly. So we have to make this small modification where we add something called a reserve price to the auction. And so that means is for every single bidder, we set also a minimum bid. Like you're allowed to bid in the auction, you have to bid at least $5. This just caps off the very bottom of the distributions, and it enables us to achieve these guarantees. And in 2014, the first positive result of this form was achieved. And it says that when we're selling a single item, that we can say that the reserve first price auction achieves a constant factor, E minus 1 over 2E, of the optimal revenue. And so what this means is that the reserve first price auction is what we call approximately revenue optimal. Okay, now this is a well and good result, but the problem is that the real world has multiple items. This guarantee only holds for a single item setting. But yeah, there's so many items in the real world. There could be multiple ad slots on a single page. I could be bidding on multiple different searches. You know, I want my ads to appear on iPad Pro searches. I want my ads to appear on iPod Plus searches, whatever. And the problem goes way off the rails when we're including multiple items, because there's now so many more different possible mechanisms we could have. There could be mechanisms where we sell items separately, where we bundle items together. There could be mechanisms where you have to purchase item 1 in order to access item 2. Crazy stuff. So this problem goes absolutely off the rails. And for years and years and years, there was absolutely no revenue guarantee for the first price auction in the multi-dimensional setting, even though it was the thing being used by absolutely every single ad exchange. No revenue guarantee until now, of course. Our results. We show for the first time ever that in the multi-item setting, the reserve first price auction with entry fees is approximately revenue optimal. So what a entry fee is, it's again another small modification that we make to the auction in order to get a guarantee. It essentially says that you have to pay me some sort of flat rate in order to access all of my auctions. So what it'll be, it's like, pay me a $10 entry fee, and now you have access to reserve first price auctions on all of the separate items. And with this slight modification, we were able to achieve a positive result. And more so than that, this actually is just one small result in a large general framework that we were able to prove of many multi-item mechanisms that are approximately revenue optimal. We show that entry fee reserve first price is a revenue optimal. We show that this hybridized auction between first price and all pay is actually a revenue optimal mechanism, and it is credible in the way that we defined credibility before. This is the first mechanism that is credible and static and approximately revenue optimal. By static, I mean it occurs over a single round. We also, in this family, proved a bunch of results about truthful mechanisms, even though the focus of this proof is, or this work is about non-truthful mechanisms. And these are mechanisms that are easy to learn in a statistical learning fashion online. That means it's very quickly to, as we're learning about different buyers and how much they value the items, we can very quickly converge to an optimal auction by tweaking parameters. So it's a really wonderful result. And I want to take you through some of the proof ideas that enabled us to achieve these non-truthful results for the first time. And so, as we were saying about the first price auction, we do not always maximize welfare, right? So in this case, the bidder who wanted it this most did not actually get the item. And we can actually quantify what this welfare loss is. So in this case, it's the optimal welfare, which would be the $100 guy getting it, minus the welfare that this auction actually achieves, the $90 guys. In this case, the welfare loss is $10. And in order to achieve a revenue optimality result on non-truthful auctions, we need to somehow bound this inefficiency of the first price auction. We have to show that even though it's not always efficient, there's some sort of cap to how inefficient it can be. Okay, so the proof of this is this beautiful little piece of geometry that we call the box lemma. Okay, so let's talk about the first price auction. Single item first price auction. Let's say I'm a bidder and I have a value T for the item, and I place a bid B. So what is my utility from placing this bid in this auction? Well, my value minus my bid, type minus B, is going to be my potential profit if I do win the auction, right? It would be $100 minus $75 in that previous example. So it's my potential profit times the probability that my bid wins the auction, right? So this encompasses this kind of like duality as to how I want to place my bid, right? If I place a bid that's really, really low, you know, my value bid gap will be huge, but I'll have a very small probability of actually winning the item. If I place a bid like right below my value, you know, maybe I have a good chance of winning the item, but I'm going for such a small profit that it's not really worth it. And we can actually understand this trade-off geometrically. So let's graph, essentially, in terms of my bid, what is my probability of winning the item, right? If I bid 0, I have no chance of winning. If I bid towards infinity, it converges to 1 of winning the item. And let's plot my value T along the x-axis. So I say that if we also take my bid B and consider the rectangle that we can fit underneath this curve with bottom right corner at T0 and left border at B, the area of this rectangle will be my utility in the auction for placing this bid, right? The width of this rectangle is T minus B, and the height is the probability that B wins, based on how we decided this graph. And we see that placing this bid far, far below my type, trying to go for a huge profit, leads us to a rectangle with very small area, right? Because it's so short, because we have such a small probability of winning. And similarly, if I placed a bid right below my type, you know, maybe I have a good chance of winning. But, you know, again, it's very thin. So it's, again, not a large area. And so the problem of figuring out what's the optimal way for me to bid is, in fact, figuring out what is the largest rectangle that we can fit underneath this curve. Okay? Now, I'm going to take what is something that is seemingly a tangent at the moment and talk about the posted price mechanism. What the posted price mechanism entails is simply, I'm the auctioneer, and I'm just going to set a price R. And I say, look, anybody who's willing to pay R, you get the item and you only pay R. Okay? So what is my optimal way of setting this price R? Well, it's going to be, if I set my price too low, you know, I have a very good chance that somebody buys the item, but I'm going for a very small profit. If I set the price too high, you know, I'm going for a very large profit, but there's a very small chance that somebody buys it. And this is a very similar trade-off, and we can actually show that the optimal posted price mechanism is actually going to correspond to the largest rectangle we can fit above this curve. Why is that? Well, the width of the rectangle is going to be R, and the height of the rectangle, well, if we look at the length of this arrow that I drew here, this is the probability that a bid of R would win the auction, which is to say that this is the probability that every single other bid in the auction is below R. So that means that 1 minus that length, which is the height of the rectangle, is going to be the probability that at least somebody values it above R, right? That's the opposite event. And the probability that at least somebody values it above R is the probability that somebody is going to purchase the item. So right, we have the utility in your first price auction is the largest rectangle below this curve. The revenue of the posted price mechanism is the largest rectangle above this curve. And the whole idea of the proof is that no matter what this curve looks like, one of these two rectangles has to be big. If we're in the setting where the first price auction is really inefficient welfare-wise, you know, your utility is a very small piece of your total value for the item. Well, that's exactly going to be the case when the revenue of the posted price mechanism is large. And similarly, when we're dealing with a case where the posted price mechanism achieves very poor revenue, that's going to be the case where my utility is very large, comparable to my value for the item. And in this case, the first price auction achieves very good welfare. In putting this duality together, we are actually able to show that the welfare loss of the first price auction is at most 4 times the revenue of the posted price mechanism. And this is the upper bound we need to make the whole dream happen. So if you want to hear a more technical version of this talk, a little bit more details in the math, you can check out this YouTube link. If you want to read the full paper, you can check it out on archive here. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. Thank you so much for listening.